Okay, I need to ask you something, and I want you to actually answer it, not just nod along. Have you ever woken up at like 3 a.m. for no reason at all? Just awake, staring at the ceiling, annoyed, already doing the math on how tired you're going to be tomorrow? Yeah, same. Basically, everyone has. And here's the thing, nobody ever tells you. For most of human history, that wasn't insomnia. That wasn't a malfunction. That was just Tuesday. There's real historical evidence and real lab evidence that for thousands of years, normal human sleep wasn't one long 8-hour block. It was 2 blocks, with an hour or two of wide-awake time sitting right in the middle of the night on purpose. And the story of how we lost that, what replaced it, and what it might actually mean for the thing you've spent your whole life calling broken sleep is one of the strangest rabbit holes I've gone down in a while. So let's get into it. This whole thing starts with a guy named Roger E. Kirch, who, and I cannot stress this enough, is not a sleep doctor. He's a historian at Virginia Tech. He was researching something completely different, what regular life actually looked like at night in pre-industrial Europe. Not the sleep itself, just, what did people do after dark 300 or 400 years ago? And while he was digging through old documents, he kept running into this one weird phrase over and over. First sleep. At first, he figured it was just a turn of phrase, an expression, but it kept showing up in diaries, in court depositions, in medical texts, in prayer books. People mentioned it the same casual way you'd mention after lunch, so he started counting. By the time he was done, he had collected more than 2,000 references to a first sleep and a second sleep across a dozen different languages going back, and I want you to actually sit with this for a second, all the way to ancient Greece. Thucydides, the guy writing real-time history during the Peloponnesian War, used a phrase that translates straightforwardly to after first sleep, casually, like it was just a normal way to mark when something happened. The Romans had multiple terms for it. Julius Caesar uses one of them in his own military writing, describing an attack that happened right after first sleep, because apparently that's just when people were up and moving. This wasn't some obscure footnote buried in a dead language. This was a basic, everyday way that people across multiple civilizations described their nights, for literally thousands of years, and somehow it just disappeared from common knowledge. Nobody teaches you this in school. I certainly never heard it growing up. Here's how it actually worked, as best as E. Kirch could reconstruct it. People went to bed pretty soon after dark. There wasn't much else to do once the sun went down, and you'd burn through your candle budget for the night. They'd sleep a few hours. That's the first sleep. Then, sometime after midnight, they'd just wake up, not in a panic, not tossing and turning, furious about it, just naturally surfacing for an hour, sometimes 2. And that hour wasn't wasted time. People prayed, people talked, people had sex. There's actually a whole pocket of historical sources that mention the first sleep specifically because that was apparently considered a better time for it than right before bed, according to one old French medical guide that gave couples exactly that advice. People got up and visited neighbors in the middle of the night, which is a sentence that should sound insane to you and somehow doesn't even register as the strangest part of this video. People just lay there thinking about their dreams because dreams from right before that waking period were considered unusually vivid, almost meaningful, in a way the ones before dawn supposedly weren't. Then, after that window closed, people drifted into a second sleep until dawn. 2 sleeps. One built-in, scheduled wake-up sitting right in the middle of the night for basically the entire run of human history before about 200 years ago, and then it just stopped. By the early 1800s, the first sleep had started creeping later and later, eating into that middle gap. By the end of that century, the second sleep had shrunk down to almost nothing. A few minutes of rolling over and drifting back off, if that. The whole 2-phase structure compressed into one block, right around the exact same stretch of history when cities started getting street lighting, then home electric light showed up and factories started running people on shift schedules that wanted one efficient chunk of downtime, not 2. We didn't evolve our way out of segmented sleep. We got lit out of it. Okay, but here's where this stops being a cool historical trivia fact and turns into something you can actually test. In the early 1990s, a psychiatrist named Thomas Ware, working at the National Institute of Mental Health, basically asked the obvious follow-up question. What happens if you take modern people and physically put them back into pre-electric light conditions? So he did it. He took healthy adults and kept them in darkness for 14 hours a night, every night for a month straight. No screens, obviously. This was the 90s, but also no lamps, no reading lights, nothing. Just darkness for 14 hours, simulating what a long winter night would have actually felt like before artificial light existed. The first few nights, people just slept. Like 11 hours straight, which honestly tells you something uncomfortable on its own. That's almost certainly accumulated sleep debt finally getting paid off all at once, debt most of us are probably carrying around right now without realizing it. But by week 4, something very specific happened. People stopped sleeping in one block. Their sleep split, almost exactly the way E. Kirch's centuries-old sources described it, into 2 sleeps of roughly 3 to 5 hours each, separated by an hour or 2 of calm, quiet wakefulness right in between. And this wasn't just people getting bored and waking up. Researchers could tie the timing directly to shifts in melatonin, the hormone that actually governs your sleep signal. The body's internal clock was restructuring itself, not just the behavior. A historian's 200-year-old paper trail and a controlled lab experiment 3 centuries later landed on the exact same pattern independently without either one knowing about the other going in. And there's a strange side detail from that experiment I have to mention, because it leans hard into the evolutionary side of all this. Vare noticed that people in the study weren't all waking up and falling back asleep in sync with each other. At almost any given moment during that middle window, somebody in the group was awake, which means zoom out far enough, and there was basically never a point where the entire group was unconscious at the same time. Some researchers have floated that as a possible reason this pattern might have stuck around evolutionarily in the first place, a kind of built-in night watch, where somebody in the group is always at least semi-alert. I want to be straight with you. That part is more interesting hypothesis than settled fact, but it's a genuinely good one, and it fits a little too well to leave out. This is the part where I tell you something that might actually change how you think about your own sleep. There's a sleep researcher at Brown University, Mary Carskadon, who pointed out something refreshingly simple. Maybe the human brain just isn't built to stay fully unconscious for 8 uninterrupted hours. Maybe waking up in the night was never the actual problem. Maybe the problem is that somewhere in the last couple hundred years, we collectively decided that waking up in the night means something is broken. There are documented cases of sleep doctors hearing this exact thing from real patients. People waking up around 2 a.m. night after night for months, convinced something was medically wrong with them, cycling through different prescriptions with the same unsatisfying result every time. And the thing that actually helped in some of these cases wasn't a new pill. It was just being told, this might be completely normal. This might be your body doing something it's done for thousands of years. A lot of people, once they actually hear that, just stop spiraling about it. And the spiraling, the anxiety about being awake, was arguably the real problem the entire time, not the waking up itself. Now here's where I have to be honest with you, because it would be cheap to make this sound like a closed case when it isn't. In 2015, a team led by a UCLA sleep researcher named Jerome Siegel did something pretty clever. Instead of digging through old diaries, they went and found actual modern humans currently living without electricity, hunter-gatherer and forager communities, the Hadza in Tanzania, the San in Namibia, the Simani in Bolivia, people living about as close to a genuinely natural light environment as exists anywhere on Earth right now. They strapped activity trackers on 94 people and collected well over 1,000 nights of combined data. And the result directly complicates everything I just told you. These groups weren't sleeping in 2 segmented blocks at all. They were sleeping in one consolidated chunk, somewhere around 6 to 7 hours, going to bed a solid 3 hours after sunset, getting up shortly before dawn. Basically the same overall shape as people sleep in cities today, just shorter. So which is it? Is segmented sleep humanity's deep ancestral default, or is it something specific to a particular time and place, not some universal human setting? And there's a second wrinkle here, completely separate from that study. Some historians have pushed back directly on Ekirch's own research, pointing out that nearly all of his 2,000 references are literary and textual, people writing about first and second sleep rather than direct clinical observation. And they note that medical and health manuals from that same era don't independently back up the idea that this was universal default practice. That doesn't mean Ekirch is wrong. It means the case isn't quite as airtight as it usually gets presented online, and I'd rather tell you that than pretend otherwise. So here's how I'd actually reconcile this instead of just picking a side and moving on. The communities in that 2015 study mostly live near the equator. Their nights are short and warm, and they stay roughly the same length all year round, somewhere around 12 hours of darkness, give or take, every single day of the year. Ekirch's historical sources, on the other hand, are overwhelmingly from Northern and Western Europe, where winter nights stretch out dramatically, something like 8 hours of daylight and 16 hours of dark in the deep of winter. So what if the real variable was never what's universally natural for the human species in some fixed, one-size-fits-all sense? What if it's just how long is the actual night you're living through? Give a human body 12 hours of darkness and one consolidated sleep with a long, relaxed evening fits perfectly fine. Give that same body 16 hours of darkness, which is exactly what Vare recreated in his lab, and exactly what pre-industrial Northern Europeans lived through every winter of their lives. And the body apparently doesn't know what to do with all that extra dark time except split it into 2. Human sleep isn't one fixed ancestral pattern that we betrayed somewhere along the way. It's a flexible system that responds to whatever light environment you actually hand it. We didn't lose some sacred original sleep. We just stopped giving our bodies nights long enough to ever need to split one in the first place, which brings this whole thing back to you lying there at 3 a.m., annoyed at yourself. You're not getting 14 hours of darkness. Almost nobody is anymore. Street lights outside your window, the glow off your phone at 11 p.m. The fact that night, for most of us, now means maybe 7 or 8 hours of actual darkness if you're lucky. We've basically engineered ourselves permanently into the short night condition, the one where a single consolidated sleep makes the most sense. So when your body does still split, when you wake up for 40 minutes in the middle of the night for what feels like absolutely no reason, that's not necessarily your body malfunctioning under modern conditions. There's a real chance that's just an old setting, quietly surfacing. You don't have to fix it. You're allowed to just let it happen. Lie there. Don't grab your phone. Don't spiral about how exhausted you'll be tomorrow. Some sleep researchers will tell you that the anxiety about being awake is actually the single biggest thing that turns a completely normal pause into real, lasting insomnia, not the waking up itself. It's a strange thing, finding out that something you've spent years quietly feeling broken about might actually be one of the oldest, most well-documented behaviors our species has. Older than most of recorded history, older than most of the languages people speak today. We didn't break our sleep, we just changed the night around it and forgot to tell our own bodies. So next time you're up at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling, maybe don't treat it like a problem to solve. Maybe just ask yourself, what would I have been doing right now 400 years ago? Let me know in the comments if you've had one of these random middle-of-the-night wake-ups and whether knowing all this changes how it feels.